A man saves a sinking bear. But what happened next shocked the forest. The forest breathed with a quiet Liam Hart hadn't known in years. Under a silver-washed sky near the edge of Yellowstone National Park, the trees stood tall and still, casting long shadows on the forest floor as the moonlight spilled across the earth like water. It was late, too late, really, but Liam found solace in walking these dark trails where no cell phones buzzed, no city lights blinked, and no one asked him for anything. The gravel crunched beneath his boots as he moved further from the campsite, his breath steaming in the cold March air, each step a retreat from the man he used to be, a finance executive with a corner office, a three-piece suit, and a steadily growing sense of emptiness. That life felt as distant as the stars overhead. He didn't know what he was looking for tonight, perhaps nothing, perhaps just the silence. But the forest had other plans. At first, it was faint, a strange noise riding the wind, somewhere between a whimper and a splash. Liam froze. He turned his head, listening. There it was again, a desperate thrashing sound, water being fought by something small, something struggling. Instinct, not logic, took over. He veered off the path and sprinted toward the sound, heart pounding, boots catching on roots and moss. The air turned colder as he neared the river, the scent of wet earth growing stronger. Then, through a break in the trees, he saw it. In the half-frozen river, caught between jagged ice and the churning current, was a small black bear cub. Its fur was slick and matted, its movements sluggish as it tried to keep its snout above water. The cub cried out, a low, gurgling yelp, and Liam didn't think. He dropped his jacket, kicked off his boots, and plunged into the frigid current. The cold hit him like a wall. Icy knives bit at his skin, stole his breath, and made his limbs feel like stone. But he pushed forward, reaching the cub just as its head began to slip beneath the surface. He wrapped his arms around the trembling body, it was smaller than he expected, shockingly light, and turned toward the shore, kicking with all his strength. The current fought back, dragging at his legs, spinning him sideways. He gritted his teeth and kept going, lungs burning, refusing to let go. Finally, with one final lunge, he stumbled onto the bank, collapsing beside the cub. His body trembled violently, soaked to the bone, but he forced himself upright. The bear wasn't moving. No, 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 he muttered, pressing his hands against its chest, unsure if this even made sense. Come on, little one. He rubbed its fur, tried to warm it, shield it from the wind with his own body. The cub made a soft noise, something between a cough and a groan. Relief flooded him. It was alive. Footsteps thundered through the woods behind him. Flashlights pierced the trees, followed by voices. Over here, someone shouted. We've got them. A moment later, two rangers burst through the brush. One of them knelt beside Liam, checking the cub, while the other checked him. You okay? She asked. You're hypothermic. Liam turned his head and blinked in disbelief. Maya. The ranger paused, then leaned in. Liam Hart? What the hell are you doing here? It had been over a decade since they'd seen each other, college friends who had once dreamed of saving the world, before Liam sold his soul to Wall Street and Maya chose the wild. Now here they were, reunited by chance in the dark, beside a freezing river and a shivering cub. They bundled the bear into a blanket and got Liam into dry clothes. As he sat wrapped in a thermal blanket inside the ranger truck, Maya looked at him with the same incredulous eyes he remembered from years ago. You jumped into a glacial river to save a bear. Didn't think about it, Liam said through chattering teeth. Just heard it, couldn't walk away. Maya shook her head and smiled, half admiration, half disbelief. "Still reckless, Hart," she said. "But maybe not all broken." Liam didn't know how to respond to that. So he watched as they drove to the ranger station, the cub now sleeping in a makeshift crate beside him, breathing in shallow, rhythmic puffs. He reached out and gently touched the tips of its wet fur. Something in his chest shifted. Over the next few days, Liam found himself returning to the station. Technically, he wasn't supposed to be there, he was just a camper, after all, but Maya made no move to turn him away. Maybe she saw the same thing he did, that he needed this more than he could explain. The cub, whom one of the rangers had nicknamed Shadow, was stable but weak, dehydrated, underweight, and frostbitten in one paw. The vets said it was a miracle it had survived at all. Liam stayed. He swept floors, cleaned enclosures, carried supplies. At first, the other rangers were skeptical. He didn't know how to handle wildlife, didn't know how to track or read signs or even use half the equipment. But he listened. He learned. And slowly, he earned their quiet respect. Maya was the one who taught him most of what he learned. She was patient, direct, and fiercely protective of the animals. When they weren't working, they'd talk about the years in between, the choices they made, the people they lost. Liam confessed more than he expected, the burnout, the drinking, the hollow promotions that meant nothing. Maya didn't judge. She just nodded and said, "Sometimes you have to lose the trail to find the right one." Days turned into weeks. Shadow began to recover, eating on her own, growing stronger. She never grew tame, but she didn't fear Liam the way she feared others. Sometimes she would lift her head when he entered the room, blink at him slowly, then go back to sleep. It felt like trust. And Liam held it gently. He found that he was sleeping better, waking with energy. His nightmares had quieted, replaced by the rustle of trees and the distant howl of coyotes. The man he'd been in the city began to feel like someone else entirely, someone distant, someone gone. Then came the day they had to let her go. Shadow was strong enough now to return to the wild, and the team prepared for the release. Liam stood at the edge of the woods as they opened the transport cage. The cub hesitated for a moment, then ambled forward, sniffed the air, and slipped into the undergrowth without looking back. Liam felt something pull in his chest. It was pride. It was grief. It was love. "You did good," Maya said beside him. "She wouldn't have made it without you." Liam nodded, but his eyes stayed on the trees. Something inside him had changed. The man who'd once measured life by numbers and net worth now measured it by breath, by paw prints, by the shape of the stars above a forest trail. And though he didn't know what came next, he knew he wasn't done here, not by a long shot. Liam Hart didn't leave Yellowstone. He told himself it was temporary, that he just needed a few more days, maybe a week, to clear his head. But deep down, he knew the truth. He wasn't ready to return to the world he came from, not when something inside him had just started to wake up. The life he had left behind, full of polished shoes, high-rises, and polite lies, felt foreign now, like a suit that no longer fit. Instead, he stayed. He slept in a modest staff cabin, woke with the sun, and took on every task offered to him. He wasn't paid, and he didn't care. The silence of the forest, the smell of pine and damp soil, the tracks in the snow, the unspoken laws of the wild, they filled him in a way that numbers never could. He spent his mornings hauling feed, fixing broken fences, helping with medical supplies, and shadowing rangers on their patrols. The work was physical and repetitive, and that's exactly what Liam needed, something to ground him, something honest. Maya was his anchor. She taught him with the same quiet intensity she gave to her wildlife studies, never coddling, never sugarcoating, but always watching to see if he'd rise to the occasion. And he did. He learned to spot scat trails and read tree markings to identify the difference between a wolf's howl and a coyote's cry. He learned to wait, to listen, to observe. And the more he learned, the more he realized how little he had truly seen before. One morning, Maya brought out a map and pointed to a place deep in the forest. "That's where we'll release the elk herd next week," she said. "And this," she added, tracing her finger to a shaded glen, "is where Shadow was found by that rancher last year. Bears cross through there when the rivers get too cold or flooded. It's an old migration path." Liam studied the map with fresh eyes. Once, lines and grids had meant profit margins and deadlines. Now they meant migration patterns, seasonal shifts, the delicate choreography of survival. That same afternoon, he walked alone to the riverbank where he had first pulled Shadow from the icy current. The ice had melted now, the water running smoother, but he still remembered the desperation in that moment, how close they both had come to vanishing. He sat on a flat stone and watched the water pass. There was peace here, a different kind of clarity. He had once been surrounded by voices, by noise, by ambition that never paused. Now he found wisdom in silence, and stillness too, where once there had only been motion. That night, as he returned to the station, he paused outside the enclosure where Shadow had stayed before her release. It was empty now, cleaned and ready for the next injured animal. But for a moment, he imagined her there, blinking slowly the way she had whenever he approached. He wondered if she remembered him, if the forest had already pulled her back into its rhythm. A few days later, a call came in, a young eagle, found tangled in barbed wire near a fence line. Liam went with Maya to retrieve it. They worked together in practiced silence, her hands steady, his cautious but capable. They freed the bird, stabilized it, and brought it back for treatment. As Maya administered antibiotics, Liam held the eagle's wings gently apart, mindful of its talons. "You're getting good at this," she said without looking up. Liam gave a quiet smile. "Feels like the first time I've ever done something real." Maya paused, met his eyes, and nodded. "It shows." Their conversations grew deeper with time, not just about animals and wilderness, but about choices, about loss, about the strange ways people found themselves again after they thought it was too late. One evening, over a campfire, Maya finally asked the question that had lingered between them for weeks. "Why did you leave it all behind?" Liam stared into the flames for a long time. "Because I was losing myself. Or maybe I already had. The money, the job, it all felt like armor. But I was empty inside. I didn't even notice how bad it had gotten until one day I realized I hadn't laughed in months, hadn't felt anything real. And when I pulled Shadow from that river, I don't know, it was the first time something mattered in a long, long time." Maya didn't respond right away. She simply poked the fire, sending sparks up into the night, then said, "Sometimes the wild doesn't just heal animals. Sometimes it heals people too." Liam looked at her, the orange light dancing across her features. In that moment, he understood why she had never left this life. It wasn't just a career, it was a calling. And he was starting to hear its voice. The following week, Liam asked to join a long-range patrol deep into the backcountry. It was a 4-day trek through remote terrain, designed to check on game cams, track seasonal migrations, and monitor the condition of bear dens. Maya approved, sending him with two experienced rangers who were skeptical at first but soon came to respect his endurance and quiet determination. Each night under the canopy of stars, Liam felt something hard and heavy inside him fall away. One evening, as they crossed a ridge and looked out across a valley where elk moved like shadows in the dusk, one of the rangers clapped him on the shoulder and said, "You ever think about making this permanent?" Liam's breath caught slightly, as if the words had unlocked something he hadn't dared to admit. "Yeah," he said, "more than I expected." When they returned, Maya met him at the trailhead. "Well," she asked, "still think you're just passing through?" Liam shook his head, grinning. "I think I'm home." That night, Liam took out a notebook he had barely touched in years and began writing, not numbers, not plans, but thoughts. Observations. He wrote about Shadow, about her eyes, her will to survive, how she had pulled him out of the current just as much as he had pulled her. He wrote about the frost on pine needles, the echo of wolves at night, the way time stretched and softened in the forest. He didn't know what the writing would become, but he knew it was honest. It was his. As spring crept in, Liam began helping with visitor education programs. He guided hikes, shared safety protocols, even spoke about wildlife rehabilitation. People listened to him, not because he spoke with authority, but because he spoke with heart. When someone asked what made him leave his old life, he would simply say, "A bear taught me what really matters." Maya teased him once, saying he was starting to sound like a poet. But beneath her smile, there was pride and connection. It was unspoken, but it pulsed between them like a steady drumbeat. One night, as they walked together beneath a waxing moon, Maya glanced at him and said, "You saved Shadow, Liam. But I think she saved you too." Liam looked out over the dark silhouette of trees, their outlines glowing faintly in the moonlight. He thought about how far he'd come, about how broken he had been, about how something wild and silent and brave had found him and refused to let him drown. "Yeah," he said quietly. "She really did." It was early summer when the call came in, hot air curling off the fields and thunderstorms looming in the western sky. Liam had just finished clearing brush along one of the walking trails when Maya's voice crackled urgently through the radio. "Liam, I need you at the station now. We've got a situation." His heart skipped. In the months he had worked with Maya, she had never used that tone unless something was truly wrong. He dropped the rake, jogged to the truck, and sped down the winding road that now felt more familiar than any street he'd known in his past life. When he arrived, she was already suited up in field gear, a map spread across the hood of the ranger vehicle, wind whipping at its edges. "What happened?" he asked, catching his breath. Maya pointed to a marked area west of the park, near a ranch close to the outer boundary. A bear, small, limping, was spotted near a livestock pen. "The rancher called it in, but he's threatening to shoot if it comes back." Liam's stomach sank. "Shadow." Maya's expression was tight. "Could be. The size fits, and the limp. She could have re-injured herself. We have to get there before someone panics and pulls the trigger." Within minutes, they were racing across gravel roads, Maya driving while Liam studied the latest updates from local trackers. Rain had started to fall in brief spurts, soft and cool, but it did nothing to calm the wildfire building in Liam's chest. The thought of Shadow, alone, injured, so close to people who wouldn't understand, who would only see danger, was unbearable. He kept seeing her eyes, remembering the moment she had slipped into the woods months ago, seemingly ready to reclaim her place in the wild. He had believed she was strong enough. Maybe he'd been wrong. As they reached the last ridge before the ranch, they parked and continued on foot, moving fast but cautiously, weaving through dense underbrush and uneven terrain. Maya was all focus, reading signs, pointing to claw marks on a tree, scat near a fence line. "She's close," she whispered. And scared. They spotted her just after dusk. Shadow was lying at the edge of a clearing, her dark fur barely distinguishable from the wet soil around her. Her left hind leg was tucked awkwardly beneath her, and her breathing came in shallow huffs. Liam's heart shattered at the sight. She looked thinner, worn, alone. "She must have injured it again," Maya murmured. "Maybe a fall or a fight." A distant shout echoed from the direction of the ranch. Liam stiffened. "We don't have much time." Maya reached into her pack, pulling out a tranquilizer dart. "We have to sedate her safely. No sudden moves. She's already stressed." Liam nodded, eyes fixed on the bear who had, in many ways, become the symbol of everything he'd rebuilt. Slowly, they moved forward, Maya keeping her dart gun steady, Liam murmuring soft words as they closed the gap. Shadow lifted her head. Her ears twitched. Her eyes, those same amber eyes, met his. There was no panic in them, just exhaustion, recognition, and something that looked dangerously close to trust. Liam knelt, still several feet away, speaking in the same voice he had used in her recovery days. "It's okay, girl. We've got you. You're not alone." Maya fired. The dart struck cleanly in the shoulder. Shadow flinched, let out a soft growl, then slowly, heavily lowered her head back onto the ground. The sedative would take full effect in a few minutes. As they waited, Liam placed a hand gently on her paw, feeling the faint tremble of life beneath her fur. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I thought you'd be okay out here." Maya placed a reassuring hand on his shoulder. "She made it this far. That says something." With nightfall settling in, they secured Shadow in a reinforced wildlife transport crate and began the slow, careful journey back. The vet was already waiting when they arrived at the station, and the examination was somber. Shadow's leg, weakened from her earlier frostbite injury, had snapped cleanly at the joint, likely while climbing or escaping a threat. In her weakened state, infection had begun to set in. "She won't survive out there alone," the vet said, glancing between them. "She needs care, possibly long-term." Maya was quiet for a long time. Then she turned to Liam. "I can call the sanctuary in Montana. They've got a place for her. It's not the wild, but it's safe, open space, woods, a chance." Liam's throat was tight. He nodded. "Do it." Over the next few days, as Shadow recovered from sedation and surgery, Liam rarely left her side. He fed her, kept her enclosure clean, and spoke to her softly, even when she was asleep. There was a stillness in those moments, a bittersweet calm, like the final pages of a book you never wanted to end. Maya joined him one evening with coffee in hand. They sat beside the enclosure, watching as Shadow, groggy but stable, rested in the straw-covered corner. "You did the right thing," Maya said quietly. "She's alive. That's what matters." Liam nodded slowly. "I know. But it still hurts." "Because it mattered," she replied. "Because she mattered." On the morning of her departure, the sanctuary transport team arrived, calm, professional, respectful. They knew how to make transitions like this as stress-free as possible. Liam stood by as Shadow was loaded into the transport crate once more, just as she had been when they first found her. She lifted her head briefly, met his eyes, then laid it down again, breathing steady. "Goodbye, brave girl," Liam whispered. "You gave me back my life." As the vehicle rolled away, carrying her toward a safer future, Liam felt something settle in his chest. It wasn't peace. It was acceptance. She had found a new kind of wild, one where she could live, even if it wasn't the freedom they had dreamed of. That afternoon, Maya found him at the overlook near the high cliffs. "You staying?" she asked gently. "I've got nowhere else to be," he said. But this time, it wasn't a deflection. It was truth. Maya smiled. "There's a new conservation program opening up in the fall. Public education, ecology, fieldwork, deeper training. You'd be a perfect fit." Liam looked out across the valley, the trees shimmering in the sunlight, a hawk riding the wind overhead. "Then I'll be here," he said. "All in." Maya raised her coffee cup toward him in a silent toast. "To the ones who find us when we're lost," she said, "and teach us how to live again." Liam clinked his thermos against hers. "To Shadow." The sun rose softly over Yellowstone, casting a golden haze across the ridgelines and filtering through tall pines, as if nature itself were taking a slow, steady breath. Liam Hart stood at the edge of a meadow just beyond the ranger station, his hand resting on the weathered wooden rail of the observation deck. Birds called across the open field. Elk grazed quietly in the distance. The wind carried the faint scent of sage and pine resin. It had been 3 months since Shadow was transferred to the wildlife sanctuary in Montana, and not a day had passed that Liam hadn't thought about her, not with worry anymore, but with a kind of reverence, as if she had become more than just a bear. She had become a turning point, a symbol, a chapter in his life he could never forget. He still remembered how her eyes had met his that last day, how, even sedated, she had seemed to understand that she was being sent somewhere safe. That she wasn't being abandoned. And that had stayed with him, that trust, that silent exchange of understanding between two creatures who had saved each other. Since her departure, Liam had thrown himself deeper into his work at the park. With Maya's encouragement, he had enrolled in a field ecology program that blended classroom theory with direct application. He studied every spare moment, but it never felt like a burden. The more he learned about ecosystems, predator-prey dynamics, migration patterns, or forest regeneration, the more it all clicked into place, as if he had always been meant to walk this path, but had taken a long, crooked road to find it. He began giving talks to visiting school groups and tourists, not from a place of expertise, but from experience. He told stories not just about the animals, but about what they had taught him. And whenever he told Shadow's story, there was a quiet in the room, a stillness that settled over listeners like falling snow. People didn't just hear it, they felt it. Because Shadow wasn't just a bear. She was a mirror, a metaphor, a testament to what happens when someone listens instead of judges, helps instead of harms. In her, people saw the fragility and strength of the wild. In Liam, they saw how a life could be reclaimed. One afternoon in early September, Liam received a letter from the sanctuary. Inside were 2 photographs. In the first, Shadow stood beside a sunlit pond, her coat thick and healthy again, her once-injured leg clearly stronger, if still a little stiff. In the second, she lay in a shaded clearing, her eyes closed, body relaxed, peaceful. Beneath the photos was a simple message: she's thriving. Thank you. Liam sat with those pictures for a long time, running his thumb over the printed edges as emotion welled up in him. Thriving. That was all he had ever hoped for her. That night, he found Maya sitting outside the ranger cabin, her legs stretched out, a mug of tea warming her hands. He handed her the photos without a word. She studied them quietly, her mouth curving into a soft smile. She looks good, she said. Like she knows she's home. Liam nodded. I think we both do. They talked long into the night, not just about Shadow, but about everything. About how Maya had once considered leaving the park years ago. How the weight of the work and the solitude had almost driven her away. About how Liam's presence, his commitment, had reminded her why she stayed. And then, about the future. They didn't speak in promises, but in possibilities. Maybe working together on new conservation initiatives. Maybe writing a book. Maybe staying right where they were and letting the forest write their story, one season at a time. A week later, Liam stood in front of a small audience at a conservation summit hosted at the visitor center. Park staff, local ranchers, students, and wildlife advocates gathered to hear what the park had been doing. When it was Liam's turn to speak, he stepped up to the podium with only a photograph of Shadow in his hand. He didn't use notes. He didn't need them. I used to work in finance, he began. My life was spreadsheets and market trends and bottom lines. I was good at it, or at least, people told me I was. But over time, I lost something. Something I didn't even realize was missing until the night I heard a sound in the woods and followed it to the river. There was a bear cub drowning. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't hesitate. I just jumped in. He paused, holding up the photograph. This is Shadow. She survived. So did I. We rescued each other in that river. And what she taught me, the way she trusted, endured, and eventually healed, became the foundation for the life I'm building now. One rooted in compassion, in presence, in something much bigger than myself. The room was silent. Then someone began to clap. Then others. Not loud, not dramatic, just the kind of applause that meant people had truly listened. Later, a rancher approached him quietly and said, "You made me think different about the bears. About all of it. Maybe there's room for both sides if we try." That night, as Liam walked back to his cabin, he stopped by the enclosure that once held Shadow, now empty. It had been converted into a temporary shelter for birds of prey. He smiled, watching a young hawk perched silently under the red lamp, recovering from a broken wing. The world kept turning. Life kept coming. And here, surrounded by trees and wind and animals fighting their own battles, he had found a rhythm that finally made sense. In the spring, he planned to visit the sanctuary, not just to see Shadow again, though he hoped for that, but to understand what came next. To find ways to strengthen the bridge between wild and human. To tell more stories like hers. To show that every life, no matter how small or scarred, deserved a chance. Back in his cabin, he sat at his desk and opened the notebook where he had started recording his thoughts months ago. He added a new entry, the final line written in slow, deliberate strokes. By saving her, I saved myself, not from drowning, but from forgetting how to live. As the wind picked up outside and coyotes howled in the distant dark, Liam leaned back in his chair and closed his eyes. He wasn't the man he used to be. He was something else now. Something wilder.